This is a very, very critical age. So this research backs this up. This is when kids are really forming their ideas of not just what sex is, but how they are going to relate to the world sexually, their sexual identification. This is when that 8 to 11 to 12 and 13 a little bit is when we really start figuring out who am I sexually. And that freaks parents out. But again, it really shouldn't, because we can do this simply. It does not have to be one gigantic conversation. You can, again, start with some of that protective information. That's always worth repeating, because we forget. There are many topics that I have heard that we have to repeat. I did not learn how to tie my shoes in one time. I had to practice tying my shoes many, many times before I got that skill down. It's the same thing when we potty train our children. It's the same thing even when they learn to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They're not going to get it perfect the first time. So same thing when we're talking about that protective information, it's worth repeating, helping them understand, what does a predator look like? What is good touch, bad touch again? Particularly since most of us are usually in denial of the fact that predators are the people we know. They're not the stranger. They're not the person at the mall. They're not someone lurking in the bathroom. 90% of sexual abuse happens from people we know, from friends, from family members. So helping them understand that, and especially as they get into this age group, into that teens, helping them understand that predators now can also be peers. So they can be kids we know, older kids we know as well. So that's kind of like, again, a place always that's worth revisiting. Also really important, obviously, is at this point, if they haven't already understood that by maybe age 6 or 7, if you haven't had those discussions, having them fully understand the mechanics of sex. How does sex look? Not how does it look, but that they understand.
What is it really?
Yeah, that they understand that. Now, again, a lot of parents are leery of this, but because what they're going to be exposed to in pornography, I make the suggestion of not having them just understand vaginal sex, but understanding oral and anal sex. And I know that many parents are shocked by that. But again, that is what the majority of pornography is. And again, most kids are exposed to pornography by age 11. And so they are going to be seeing a lot of anal sex and a lot of oral sex. They need to understand from you first what that means before they see it in basically a disgusting, sometimes simulated rape simulation in what is going on in pornography. So they need to understand from you what that means. What is vaginal sex? What is oral sex? What is anal sex? Something else when you talk about that's really important is, again, focusing on that intimacy and healthy relationships. They should start understanding what a healthy relationship looks like. What do I want in a mate? What do I want in a partner? What kind of partner am I going to be? Helping them understand that like attracts like, helping them understand the difference between friendships and romantic relationships. This is where some of them might start going, oh, I have a crush on so-and-so. Helping them explore those feelings. Those are very new feelings. And we forget that because we maybe by the time we're a parent, we had maybe 10 crushes throughout middle school and high school. And we have forgotten what those new feelings were like and what are we supposed to do with those feelings. Helping our kids kind of navigate that minefield. And again, things that I know parents don't want to talk about, but they need to at this age: masturbation and sexual identification, helping them understand what it means to be gay, what it means to be a lesbian, what it means to be straight. We need to help our kids understand that, and again, parents are worried about these, but they're usually worried for different reasons. And I think the best way to approach this is just with compassion and love, and always thinking about, you may not think that you may think 100% that your child is straight, but we really don't know. And so we need to ask ourselves, how do I want my child to feel? Do I want my child to suffer in silence because I haven't been accepting and loving? Or do I want them to come and maybe I want to be the first to know if those are their feelings? So that's kind of, I think, a way of thinking that we need to be a little more sensitive to, and kind of just having that bigger picture. I have several times asked my gay friends, how do you wish your parents had handled this? And it is a very different spectrum of what I had thought, and because most of them can barely even answer that question because it was received so negatively from their parents. They're like, my mother just started crying her head off. My parents were so shocked. And I don't want to be, I know I don't want to be that parent. So kind of as we approach these topics, just with real kindness, with really paying attention to each of our children's needs. If you have more than one child, some of these discussions are worth doing one-on-one. Sometimes these topics can be done as a group. Talking about healthy relationships, talking about intimacy, that's a great group discussion. But when we're talking perhaps about something more critical like sexual identification or masturbation, those are worth having on an individual basis. And of course, puberty, this is again where if you haven't already started those discussions, it's helping them know, hey, your body is going to change.
Yeah, and I've
really
found,
important.
especially with the 7-8-year-olds, like you said, that's a great place to start. Your body's going to start changing. You're going to notice other kids, their bodies are changing. I mean, that's a very natural place to start. And then I love that and then of course, as you progress from that, you get into some of these deeper topics like you were talking about that, like you said, people sometimes don't think about. They're like, oh, that's about other things. That's just something that we don't even get to. But yeah, we need to get to these things. And I love that you're talking about it in a matter-of-fact, straightforward way. These are all topics that we do need to have a conversation with our children about. And of course, we want to lay our own values on that to some degree, right? The things that we feel are important, the things that we've experienced. And I think a lot of parents really struggle with that, especially when we get to this age range where we're talking more specifically about sexuality and about kinds of sexual activities that we feel are wonderful or less wonderful or whatever. I think some parents really think, well, this is what I think and this is what I've seen, but is it okay for me to tell my child that this is okay and this isn't okay? Or am I supposed to just give them the information and leave it at that?
And
So
that's why
what do you do?
I think in our books, everything is very open-ended. And it's done on purpose. And we always have criticism from both sides in our books. People think they're too liberal, people think they're too conservative. But those are topics that we say, well, what do you think? Like when it comes to masturbation, if the parent poses the question to the child, like, well, what do you think? Is this healthy or is this not healthy? And just letting the child lead that conversation. It can be the same thing with talking about topics of sexual identification. Like, well, what have you heard? What are your feelings? Have you had any friends talking about this yet? Because again, we want to just let them share their feelings on that. Again, because what they have been exposed to at school, in the media, is very different than what we were taught. And so it's always really good to just get, a little taste of what they think first before, but definitely share your personal values and your cultural values on that. And speaking of that too, we need to talk, and something that is one of our sex books are probably one of the few that talk about social media and sexting, even at that younger age. Because again, so many parents are giving phones to preteens. You need to address that. It is becoming an epidemic.
Yes.
And most of us don't realize, and it's not just in the schools, it is coming to our congregations as well. Most people don't realize that. I spoke to a conference with pastors, and they were like deer in the headlights. And I was like, that's one of those things that we want to think of. That's happening somewhere else. And
it's happening everywhere.
Not. It's happening. The pressure is on all of our daughters, and that same double standard that exists for everything else. We often attack the girl for sending photos, but we don't go after the boy who asked for them, and so that is a great conversation in itself for preteens and teens, is the double standard, and how that is being applied right on when it comes to social media and sexting and apps and phone use, that it's rampant. And that's something that I know, again, parents, we want to check off. That is something that we revisit with our children probably more than anything, is social media and apps, because they are changing so frequently. They are so much a part of our lives, especially for teenagers. We have to be on top of those things and have to revisit that conversation very frequently.